Good morning. This lecture video is going to look at the different male germ cells, Serotonin cells, and basically the process of spermatogenesis, or the formation of sperm. So inside the seminiferous tubercles, which remember are located inside the testes, there are basically 6 different cell types that are going to play a role in the formation of sperm. This is going to include supporting cells called sustenticular cells, and that will be Serotonin cells, which we'll get to in a second. But it also includes the germ cells, the 5 different types of germ cells that are going to be formed before a sperm cell is complete. So if we were going through this process here, we're going to start with the spermatogonia. These are the least mature, or the youngest of the germ cells. So all of the cells on this page are going to be considered germ cells. And they basically are going to sit in the very basement membrane inside the seminiferous tubules. These are the stem cells of the testes, which means that they are still able to differentiate into a variety of different cell types throughout their adulthood. So they are examples of stem cells. So when we start up here, spermatogonium are going to be diploid cells, and they're going to actually go through a stage of mitosis to form primary spermatocytes. Okay, so primary spermatocytes are still going to be diploid too. Remember, mitosis is making identical copies of cells during the cell cycle. So primary spermatocytes then are going to go through meiosis, which is division of nuclear material. Remember when we talked about the difference between mitosis and meiosis? Because remember, we want a sperm cell to only have half the number of chromosomes in it, right? That's our goal, because eventually it's going to join with an egg, which has half the amount of chromosomes in it. And once they join together, then that zygote, or that new structure, will have a full set of chromosomes. So we got half from the sperm and half from the mom. So at this point, a spermatogonium has a full set of chromosomes in it. We have to go through this division process that will start at the primary spermatocyte to the end of the sperm cell, which will divide the number of chromosomes in half. So spermatogonium will go through mitosis, and they will form primary spermatocytes. Primary spermatocytes are going to start to go through meiosis, and so during the first stage of meiosis, prophase 1, metaphase 1, anaphase 1, and telophase 1, they're going to then form cells, which are going to be called secondary spermatocytes, and then again, these are still diploid cells. And then those cells will go through meiosis 2, so prophase 2, metaphase 2, anaphase 2, telophase 2, cytokinesis, in order to form spermatid. And these spermatid then would be haploid cells, because they would only have one copy of the chromosomes in them, half the number of chromosomes in them. And then those spermatids would end up forming sperm cells. Each sperm cell would then be a haploid cell containing one copy of the chromosomes. So that is the stage of spermatogenesis. This occurs, like I mentioned, in the seminiferous tubercles, and the process begins at puberty, so at which time sperm are going to be produced constantly throughout a man's life. So once this process starts in puberty, it will continue on throughout a man's life. One production cycle from spermatogonia through formed sperm takes approximately 64 days. And a new cycle starts approximately every 16 days. So even though sperm can be produced from puberty throughout the end of a man's life, typically as a man gets older, the total number of sperm, or this process, actually slows down, typically after the age of 35. And then there are other environmental factors that can affect how fast this controls, including like smoking. It's been found that smoking can lower sperm count, regardless of how old you are. It can reduce the amount of sperm that's being produced. So we talked about the 5 germ cells then. So the other cell that's going to be a part of this process is called the Serotonin cells. And Serotonin cells are a type of supporting cells They are an example of a sustenticular cell, which are going to be found in epithelial tissue. So they're kind of a specific example of a sustenticular cell. But their job is to secrete signaling molecules that are going to promote sperm production. And they also can control whether or not germ cells live or die. They actually extend physically around these different germ cells, so they kind of branch out. This diagram doesn't show it great, but they would actually branch out and surround these different germ cells. And this is important because the junction that connects these sustenticular cells, or these Serotonin cells, is what's going to create the blood-testes barrier. And the blood-testes barrier is really important because it helps keep blood-borne substances from reaching these germ cells. We want to protect them. And at the same time, it helps the antigens, or the proteins that are found on the germ cells, from escaping into the bloodstream, which would actually promote an autoimmune response. Your body would actually attack them. So the Serotonin cells really play an important role in protecting these germ cells so that they can eventually form into the sperm that we want them to form. So germ cells and Serotonin cells are the cells that are involved in sperm production, in the production of a sperm. So then the last thing is, once we have a sperm that's produced, here are the different parts of the actual sperm. So sperm are smaller than almost all of the cells in your body. So even a female egg is the largest cell in the body. A sperm is one of the smallest. There are approximately 100 to 300 million sperm produced every single day by a male, whereas women typically only ovulate one egg per month. So there's tons more sperm than there are eggs. Here's the structure of the sperm. They have a distinct head, midpiece, and tail region. The head of the sperm contains the nucleus, so the control center of the cell, and it's surrounded by a little cap, which is called the achromosome. And this cap is actually filled with lysosomal enzymes, which is really important for preparing the sperm to participate in fertilization. And remember, back into our cell unit, lysosomes help kind of clean up the cell, keep it clean and functioning efficiently. In the midpiece, there's going to be a whole bunch of mitochondria that are going to help provide the energy to make the ATP needed in order for the tail, which is the flagellum, to be able to move and propel the sperm through the female reproductive tract and hopefully to the egg, which will then allow fertilization to occur. So those are the cell structures and the process of developing a sperm cell through spermatogenesis, starting with a germ cell, a spermatogonia, and ending with an actual sperm cell that would contain only half of the amount of the genetic information, 23 chromosomes. Okay, last but not least, we need to talk about the major male hormone, and that's testosterone. Testosterone is an androgen or steroid hormone that's produced by Leydig cells. These cells are located just next to the seminiferous tubules in the testes. In a male embryo, the testosterone is secreted by these cells at about the 7th week of development, and peak concentration will be reached during the 2nd trimester. And this early release of testosterone in a fetus is what's going to result in the anatomical difference or differentiation of the male sex organs. So it plays a really important role in the development of those male sex organs. In childhood, testosterone concentrations are really low, actually, but then once puberty hits, these testosterone concentrations are going to increase, and they are going to activate those physical changes that occurred to men during puberty and also start the process of spermatogenesis. So it's going to play a really important role once puberty hits. Male produces typically 6 to 7 milligrams every single day. It's the presence of testosterone is necessary to keep the male reproductive system working properly. The manufacture of testosterone is going to, because it happens in the testes, it's actually the level of testosterone in the testes is extremely high compared to the level of testosterone like in circulation or around your bloodstream. Maintaining the normal concentrations of testosterone is going to be really important, again, in the development of sperm cells or spermatogenesis, and also going to play a really important role in several other functions, including muscle development, bone growth, the development of secondary sex characteristics, so those characteristics that are typical of a male, and then also maintaining sex drive. In females, the ovaries secrete a very small amount of testosterone as well, although most of it is converted to a different type of hormone. And then a really small amount of testosterone is also secreted by the adrenal glands in both males and females. So even though testosterone is kind of considered a male hormone, females also produce a very, very small amount of testosterone. So the regulation of testosterone is really important for male reproductive function, and it is a combination or a relationship with two really important endocrine organs or endocrine glands, and that's going to be your hypothalamus gland and your anterior pituitary gland. So let me explain how this works real quick. Let's just say that the testosterone levels in the blood of a male is low. When that blood hits the brain and the hypothalamus recognizes that the levels are too low, it is going to cause the hypothalamus to release a chemical called GnRH, which is gonadotrophin releasing hormone. That hormone then is going to go through the bloodstream, hit the pituitary gland, specifically the anterior pituitary gland, and it's going to cause that pituitary gland to release two chemicals, LH and FSH. You're going to see these two hormones involved again when we talk about female reproduction, but we're just looking at how they affect males right now. So the LH and the FSH are basically going to attach themselves or stimulate those Leydig cells to start producing testosterone. Also, a chemical called inhibin B. So these two hormones are going to stimulate the release of the production of testosterone and inhibin B. That is going to cause an increased level of testosterone in the blood, right? Because we've increased the amount of testosterone production that's occurring. So as that blood then travels back up to the brain, it will hit the hypothalamus and it will recognize then that the levels have gone up, and it will stop the release of GnRH in order to keep the levels of testosterone in the blood where we want it to. The inhibin that is produced then is also going to act as a way to stop production, because inhibin, what that does is it actually inhibits the release of LH and FSH. So as the testes produce more testosterone and inhibin, that inhibin is going to travel through the bloodstream, hit the pituitary gland, and also stop the release of these hormones in order to keep the levels where we want them to be. So again, testosterone levels are too low, so we need the body to produce more. The hypothalamus will release GnRH. That will cause the release of LH and FSH. Those two hormones are going to tell the testes and the Leydig cells to produce testosterone, but it will also produce inhibin B. As the levels of testosterone increase, the hypothalamus will recognize that increase and it will stop producing GnRH. And also, as the inhibin levels start to increase, they will affect the anterior pituitary gland and they will stop the release of LH and FSH. And this is how the levels of testosterone then are going to be maintained within the body. That summarizes the physiology of spermatogenesis in a nutshell.